Hello, everyone. Welcome back to 3 News Now. I'm Stephanie Haney. It's Monday, October 26th. I have your top stories from WKYC.com and our WKYC app. Thank you so much for choosing to be here to get filled in on what is impacting you here in Northeast Ohio. And I want to start off by saying Happy Victory Monday to the Cleveland Browns fans out there. In case you haven't heard it yet, the Browns are a 5-2 football team. Here is a fun fact for you, courtesy of Jay Crawford in his new column that you can find on WKYC.com, which we'll talk more about in just a little bit. But the Browns starting 5-2 is the best start since opening 6-1 in 1994, which is the last year that they won a playoff game. So that might have some foretelling for what we might see this season, hopefully. But before we get into the celebration, we have to start with some relatively breaking news. This morning, we learned that Cleveland Browns wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. will be out for the rest of the season with a torn ACL in his left knee. The Cleveland Browns confirmed that today. The injury happened on the first play for the offense in the win over the Bengals on Sunday, unfortunately. So now we are looking at the rest of the season, the final 9 games of the regular season, and any playoff appearances without Odell Beckham Jr. We are wishing him a speedy recovery. He will be having to have surgery in order to correct that ACL injury. So wishing Odell a speedy recovery and hoping he is back to 100% as soon as possible. Now, let's talk about that game, though. Jay Crawford, his take is up on WKYC.com, and he says that you will likely not see a more exciting game with the Browns this season. And if you watched the game on Sunday, boy, was that a game. The final score, 37-34 for the Browns to win over the Bengals. It truly came down to the very last seconds, and there were plenty of records actually broken on Sunday. In the fourth quarter alone, there were 5 go-ahead touchdown passes. So, of course, the difference between a go-ahead touchdown pass and a regular touchdown pass is you're looking at a score change there. So when you take the lead with that, and that is the first time that's ever happened in NFL history that there were 5 go-ahead touchdown passes in the fourth quarter of an NFL game. So that's retaking of the league. Now, the score was up and down the entire time. I think there was maybe only one punt the entire game. The Bengals scored on almost every single drive, if not every drive, and a very concerning start to that game. Browns quarterback Baker Mayfield started 0 for 5 for passes. That includes that first pass, which was intercepted. That was the play, of course, where OBJ sustained that injury to his knee. But after that, Baker Mayfield threw a perfect game. He landed his first pass 5 minutes into the second quarter, but then he went on for 21 straight completions. That totally smashed the previous Browns record. That was held by both Bernie Kosar and Kelly Holcomb, which was 16. So 21 completions in a row for Baker Mayfield. It could have been 22 or 23, but he did have to spike the football to stop the clock before he threw that final touchdown pass to Donovan Peoples-Jones to win the game with 11 seconds left on the clock. Thankfully, that last pass from Cincinnati quarterback Joe Burrow did not land, so we were able to win the game 37-34, but Joe Burrow was just incredible. He completed 35 of 47 passes for 406 yards, 3 touchdowns, but Jay's take is that Baker Mayfield really stole the show. He said the mark of a great quarterback is being able to shake off a bad pass or a bad start and be clutch when you're really needed in the game and the game hangs in the balance. And Jay says that is what Baker Mayfield did in Cincinnati. So if you want to read more on Jay's take, that's on WKYC.com and our WKYC app. Next up, the Browns face the Raiders, which are 3-3, which should be an interesting game. That's happening here at home at First Energy Stadium in Cleveland. Now, Back to OBJ for just a moment. With OBJ out for the rest of the season, the question is, will the Browns look to trade for another wide receiver? Our 3 News sports analyst Ben Axelrod put up an analysis of that on WKYC.com because the trade deadline is next week. It's November 3rd, which also happens to be Election Day. So that's a big day for not only people who follow politics, but also sports fans here in Northeast Ohio. Now, typically, Ben writes that what we're looking at when we're looking at these trades ahead of the trade deadline are players who are in the final year of their contracts and they're on teams that don't necessarily have the best playoff aspirations. So he's broken down a few possibilities. What is looking at the top 5 prospects for the Browns to potentially trade for a wide receiver. Here's one that I found particularly interesting. Brashad Perriman, who is currently on the New York Jets. Now, Perriman played for Cleveland with Baker Mayfield in 2018. So when he was on the Browns in 2018, he caught 16 passes for 340 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, that was over 10 games with Mayfield as the quarterback. That was Mayfield's rookie year as the quarterback. Well, Perriman was supposed to stick with the Browns in 2019, but he was let out of his contract after the Browns acquired OBJ. So since then, Perriman has played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's currently on the New York Jets, which is the league's only still winless team right now. So with OBJ out, it could be possible that we could see Perriman back on the Browns, back with Baker Mayfield. Now, if you want to check out more of those possibilities, check out Ben's article on WKYC.com. He's also tweeted that out, so you can follow him on Twitter at Ben Axelrod. Now, other big news that's happening today, the Senate is expected to confirm Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court of the United States. That's after yesterday, where the Senate voted 51-48 to begin the process to have a final vote on the floor. Now, 2 Republicans, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Susan Collins of Maine, as promised, did vote against advancing the nominee. However, at least one of them has said, because the vote is happening, she will likely vote for Barrett in the actual confirmation vote, which is scheduled to happen today. Now, all of the Democrats who voted were opposed to that. California Senator Kamala Harris, who is the Democratic candidate for vice president, she missed the vote because she's campaigning in Michigan. But as you can see from that vote, 51-48, had Harris been in the Senate to vote, it would not have made a difference. The vote still would have come to pass today, which is expected today. So that's the final vote expected today. And this is historic in a number of ways. First, no Supreme Court of the United States nominee has ever been confirmed so closely to an upcoming election. But also, this is one of the first nominees to the Supreme Court in recent memory that has got 0 support from the minority party. So in this case, that being the Democrats. Now remember, it was not that long ago that presidential picks for the Supreme Court actually got wide support on both sides of the aisle, but that is absolutely not the case in this instance. Many Democrats taking the stance that this is inappropriate to be doing so close to a presidential election, especially given what happened with former President Barack Obama's attempt to nominate Judge Merrick Garland to the court in 2016. That was months and months and months and months before the upcoming election, but the Senate blocked that from happening at this point. Now, Barrett, her writings do show she is personally against abortion. There was also a ruling on Obamacare that shows a deeply conservative thinker in Judge Barrett. But Barrett, during her confirmation hearings in the Senate Judiciary Committee, said that she can separate her personal views from interpreting the Constitution as it applies to the law. She also said that when she previously made personal comments about her views on these issues, which many people find to be controversial, that she was doing so as a private citizen, and now in her capacity as a public official, as a member of the court, she doesn't find it appropriate to comment on her personal stance on things like abortion. Regardless of that, her confirmation to the court will solidify a 6-3 majority for the conservatives on the Supreme Court for the foreseeable future. Judge Amy Coney Barrett is only 48 years old. This is a lifetime appointment, so she will be shaping the law here in the United States for potentially decades to come. Now, former Vice President Joe Biden on Sunday, in a 60 Minutes interview with CBS, said that if elected, when asked if he would be interested in packing the court or adding more justices to the Supreme Court to try and even out that balance and make it a more moderate court. He said what he will do is convene a bipartisan commission in order to make recommendations on how to reform the justice system. He said that goes beyond the current makeup of the Supreme Court, and he says what he doesn't want to see is a situation where whoever is in power is treating this like passing a football around and is subject to the political whims, and that there are things that need to be done in order to reform the judicial system in general. Now, Republicans do have the votes to confirm the nominee. They don't need Vice President Mike Pence as a tiebreaker. There were a lot of scenarios kicked around where Pence might have been required to be a tiebreaker in order to move that confirmation forward, but that is not the case. And we are now learning that Vice President Mike Pence has potentially been exposed to COVID-19. So Democratic leaders have asked Pence to stay away from that confirmation vote and not preside over that vote in the Senate today due to potential health risks because his aides have tested positive for COVID-19. Senate Minority Leader, Democrat Chuck Schumer, has said that Pence being there not only would violate for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention guidelines, but it would be a violation of, quote, common decency and courtesy. Schumer has told Democratic senators to get in, to vote, to get out, not to spend time in the Senate in order to keep their health of the utmost concern. Now, Pence had previously said that he wouldn't miss this vote for the world, so it remains to be seen if he will actually preside over that vote when that happens today. But it was over the weekend that we learned that Pence had been exposed to several members of his inner circle who had tested positive for COVID-19. One of those people is Pence's chief of staff, Mark Short. So CNN reported this morning that both Pence and the Second Lady Karen Pence have tested negative for COVID-19. But remember, what we know from medical experts is that a negative COVID-19 test does not mean that you don't have to quarantine, because there are several days of an incubation period when it comes to COVID-19. And despite learning of these positive tests in his inner circle, Pence has continued to be on the campaign trail. Now, President Donald Trump was asked about this on Sunday, and he said that he did hear about it and that Pence is quarantining. But Pence is not quarantining. He was just in Cincinnati last Wednesday. This was after learning that one aide had tested positive. Now, an infectious disease expert at George Mason University, Saskia Popescu, said that Pence's decision to travel is grossly negligent. She says this is an insult to everybody who has been working in public health and the public health response. She says she also finds it really harmful and disrespectful to the people going to these rallies where Pence is present. And if you take a look at the images from these rallies, you see people crowded closely together. You see large groups of people. You see not a lot of mask wearing. And also, the expert is mentioning that it's not necessarily in the best interest of Pence's staff, who has to travel with him. She said he needs to be staying home for 14 days and that campaign events are not essential. Now, the vice president's office has said that he is deemed an essential worker, so he doesn't need to quarantine or is not required to quarantine as the vice president of the United States. But what his office has not commented on is how those campaign activities amount to essential work. Definitely a difference in the work being done there by the vice president. Now, after campaigning in Florida on Saturday, Pence was seen wearing a mask returning to Washington aboard Air Force Two shortly after the news was made public about his chief of staff testing positive for COVID-19. Now, as all of this is going on, fear and anxiety levels are raising about COVID-19 here in the U.S. About half of U.S. states have seen their highest daily infection numbers so far at some point in the month of October. Now, that is going all the way back to when we first learned about COVID-19 being present here in the U.S. There have been record daily infections reported on Friday across the U.S. and very close to that number on Saturday. So almost 2 days of back-to-back record highs across the U.S. as a whole for new reported infections. This is coming from data from Johns Hopkins University. There were 83,718 new cases reported on Saturday. That was just after Friday, when there was a record of 83,757 new COVID-19 cases reported on Friday. So what you're looking at there is a difference of about 40 cases that kept that from being 2 back-to-back days. Now, before that, the most cases reported in the U.S. on a single day had been a little over 77,000. That was back in July 16th to be exact. And Ohio is one of 7 states that saw record high infection levels with those new daily reported numbers on Saturday. On Saturday, Ohio saw more than 2,800 new daily reported cases of COVID-19. Those other states being Alaska, Colorado, Illinois, Michigan, New Mexico, and Oklahoma. Now, switching gears here, as the anxiety raises here, something that is used to treat anxiety at times is medical marijuana, which is legal here in Ohio. And marijuana could be a turning point issue in this upcoming election, and it could be what's responsible, if it happens, for flipping Congress to Democratic control. Right now, the House is controlled by Democrats, the Senate is controlled by Republicans, but marijuana is on the ballot in multiple states, and the parties' differing approaches to it could be instrumental in how this election turns out when we do get those final results. There are 4 states in different parts of the country that will be voting on marijuana initiatives on the ballot on November 3rd. So those states are New Jersey, Arizona, South Dakota, and Montana. Now, already, most people in the U.S. live in a state where marijuana is at least legal in some form, and 11 states have now fully legalized marijuana, both medicinally and recreationally for adults. Here in Ohio, marijuana use is legal for medicinal purposes. Now, the presidential election could very much shape the policy of what's to come at the federal level when it comes to marijuana use. President Donald Trump hasn't necessarily been clear on the matter. He said that he is inclined to support bipartisan efforts to ease the U.S. restrictions on marijuana, but doesn't have a clear position on broader legalization. But he has appointed attorneys general who are very against the widespread use of marijuana in the U.S. However, his administration isn't exactly cracking down on businesses in states where marijuana is legal, but it does remain a scheduled substance at the federal level. Now, former Vice President Joe Biden has said that he would decriminalize but not necessarily legalize the use of marijuana. But he also said that he would expunge all prior cannabis use convictions, and end jail time for drug use alone. He has talked at length about how much he supports drug courts, which are courts that you go into that have different remedies available. So you're not necessarily putting someone in jail for the use of drugs. You're sending them to other things, to diversion programs, to medical support programs where people can enter rehab and those kinds of things, which would make sense based on what Biden had said about, that's Winston moving the camera there, which would make sense about what Biden has said about the broader reform of the judicial system. So this election could be a game changer for marijuana in our industry. Now, speaking of the election, the official election day is 8 days away now, coming up next Tuesday, November 3rd. But if you checked out the lines this weekend, specifically in Cuyahoga County, you saw that a lot of people are out doing their voting ahead of time. Now, this weekend was the first opportunity for weekend hours for early in-person voting. And at the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections in downtown Cleveland, the line wrapped all the way around the block, so much so that it was actually going up the I-90 off-ramp at Chester Avenue. And then police had to come and divert that line along Chester Avenue to get people off of the on-ramp because they were lining up on the on-ramp heading toward the highway. Obviously, that's not exactly safe, but that just shows the number of people who are showing up for early in-person voting, and also the lack of access for early in-person voting. Now, these photos were posted by the Cuyahoga County Democrats Executive Director Ryan Puente, and then he did show, that was when he posted a photo later showing the police had moved the line to Chester Avenue. Now, just 10 days, it was when this happened on Saturday, there were just 10 days to go before the election. Now we have just 8 days to go before the election. Now, some people, as I said, are celebrating these long lines as showing huge interest in the electoral process, that people are engaged, that there will be a high voter turnout in general for this election. Other people are saying, however, that these long lines are not something to be celebrated, that this just shows that the current system needs to be revamped, and that access to voting is not where it needs to be, particularly in areas where we see people have historically been disenfranchised. We're talking about people of color, low-income communities where it's become more difficult for people to vote. The pandemic is playing a role in this as well. Early voting is being encouraged by medical professionals, also by officials, because everybody wants to see a situation on November 3rd where we don't have people crammed in tightly, where it becomes a super spreader event for COVID-19. So if you're getting out to vote, just remember you do have early in voting in-person options between now and leading up to Election Day here in Ohio. And you can also get that absentee ballot and you can mail that in, or you can drop that off in person at your county board of elections. Every county in Ohio has a drop box at the county board of elections. Now, if you are mailing that ballot back, remember that officials have recommended you mail it back no later than tomorrow, October 27th. Yes, Tuesday, October 27th. Technically, you have until November 2nd to mail that ballot back. But if you do that, you do need to make sure you go into a post office and you get it date stamped to prove that it was in the mail on November 2nd. And then it also has to arrive by November 13th, which is out of your control once it's given to the postal system. And we have no reason to believe that the postal system will not do everything as normal and deliver that mail as expected, but delays do happen. So people are recommending you get that in the mail tomorrow, or you drop off that absentee ballot in person at the county board of elections. You can do it after hours, put it in that secure drop box that you can find at those county board of elections. One more thing to let you know before you go, we do still want your best DIY tips and life hacks. This is for a segment called Who Knew You Could. This is something we have on our 5 p.m. TV show, What's New, where we share your hacks like how to get wine out of the carpet before it stains, also how to stop a can of pop from exploding all over you, how to reseal a bag of potato chips, things like that. Whatever you're doing to make your life easier that people might not already know about. So let us know. You can text that to us with photos at 216-344-3300, or just open up the WKYC app. You can send us photos and videos right there from your phone. Give us a little description of how your life hack works so that we can explain it to everybody else. And this is very important. Make sure you give us your name, where you're from, and your phone number or an email address so we can let you know if we plan to use your life hack and let people know who knew you could do this, that, or the other thing to make your life just a little bit easier. One more reminder for you as well before we go. 3 News Now with Stephanie Haney is now a podcast, so you can subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. I would love it if you would give it a rating and a review. Let us know what you're thinking about it so that we can connect with more people here in Northeast Ohio. That's it for your 3 News Now early update for Monday, October 26th. I'll be back here at 3 p.m. with those latest numbers in from the Ohio Department of Health, and also more top stories from WKYC.com and our WKYC app. Everyone enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Stay safe and be well. I'll see you back here shortly. I'm Stephanie Haney.